Hello, this is Chuck Ridgway, Automation Technology Manager at Horner. Thanks for joining us for another Tuesday live stream. We've got a great topic for you today. Here it is. Using the Horner Wi-Fi adapter. The Horner Wi-Fi adapter is an accessory that a lot of you don't know about, but we're going to change that today. It's an accessory you can use to allow an OCS to log in and communicate over an existing Wi-Fi network, maybe in a facility or on a campus or something like that. And you can also use the Wi-Fi adapter so the OCS can create its own local Wi-Fi network around the machine. That can be useful for using WebMI on a mobile device, maybe doing some local programming from your laptop without a cable. Just a lot of uses for this accessory. Now, I am pre-recording again today. However, don't worry, we have folks standing by as we stream this video live so that you can get all your questions answered. If you're watching it live, give us those questions in the chat section. If you're watching it on replay, like a lot of you do, give us those comments and questions in the comment section, and we'll get back to you just as soon as we can. All right, let's take a look at how we're breaking down today's topic. Okay, we're going to start by answering the question, what is the Horner Wi-Fi adapter? We're going to go through the specifications. We're going to talk installation. We'll review a couple different applications for the product. We're going to go through configuration. And of course, there will be demonstrations throughout. Okay, so what is the Horner Wi-Fi adapter? Well, it's an accessory that you can purchase that effectively adds Wi-Fi capability to any OCS that has a full-sized USB-A port. So that means it's compatible with the X5. It's compatible with the entire XL series from the XL4 on up, so no support for XLE and XLT, and it's compatible with the XL Prime series. And in the future, when the Canvas series is released, it will be compatible with that as well. Now, one of the great things about the Wi-Fi adapter is that it adds Wi-Fi support without taking away any functionality from the built-in wired ports of the OCS. So if you have a single Ethernet port OCS like an XL4, it's going to add Wi-Fi but still retain the wired connection. And if you have a dual LAN port OCS like an XL7 Prime, for instance, then it will add a third Ethernet port. So you still have the functionality of the two wired ports, you're just adding Wi-Fi to the mix. So that's very convenient. Now let's talk specifications. So the Wi-Fi adapter has a radio embedded in it that is based on Wi-Fi 4, also known as wireless N, and that's a 2.4 gigahertz network with a maximum throughput, theoretically at least, of 72 megabits per second. Now from a security standpoint, it uses WPA2, and the USB port that's included on the adapter is where the unit gets its power, and that's the only connection on the adapter. Now, from an installation standpoint, the Wi-Fi module is designed to be mounted on the outside of the control cabinet. You don't want to have it inside a metal control cabinet because that's going to just have too much attenuation of the signal, and you're not going to get good reception. So that's why the module has been designed to mount on the outside of the control cabinet. Now, from a mounting standpoint, the module is based on a 3/4 NPT thread, so you just need to have a clearance hole for that, and it includes the gasket and the nut that's required to, mount it through that clearance hole. And if it's mounted properly, it maintains a NEMA 4X and an IP65 rating, and then the USB cable that is molded to the unit is 6 feet in length, just a little less than 2 meters. Okay, let's talk about different applications for the Wi-Fi module. So let's first talk about client mode. So that's one of the two modes that's available for the module. So client mode effectively allows an OCS to connect to an existing Wi-Fi network. So some example applications there. Maybe you have a building automation application. Maybe you're using the OCS as a lighting controller on a ball field or somewhere on a campus where they have a strong Wi-Fi network throughout, and it just makes sense to have the OCS utilize that network. Maybe you're using the OCS as a tank monitor, And on the campus or the area in which the tanks are installed, there is a big open area with an outdoor Wi-Fi network. So it probably makes sense in that case to also utilize Wi-Fi for that application. Or maybe you're using the OCS in a mobile application, controlling a piece of mobile equipment, and every time that mobile equipment returns home, you want it to log in wirelessly to a local network and report a bunch of data that maybe was gathered while the equipment was out and about doing its job. Now, the other mode that the adapter can be used in is called access point mode. So in access point mode, this allows an OCS to create its own local Wi-Fi network around the machine. So this can be useful in a scenario where maybe you want to be able to do wireless monitoring of the machine using a mobile device or a computer, or maybe you just want to have the convenience of being able to do Seascape troubleshooting wirelessly around the machine. So that's an application where access point mode makes a lot of sense. All right, now let's start talking about configuration. Now, from a configuration standpoint, you can configure the Wi-Fi module from the hardware configuration area, and you'll notice at the very bottom below the network ports, you'll see the option to configure the OCS Wi-Fi module. Now, when you're configuring the module, there are some general areas of configuration that we'll talk about. So first of all, you need to configure the mode that you're using, client or access point. So that's up at the top. You'll also see in the center area, you'll find the access point configuration, and just below that, you'll see the client configuration. And then in the lower right-hand corner, that's where you can access the general configuration for the wireless LAN, things like IP address, etc. Now, in general, for a lot of the parameters that you're configuring for the Wi-Fi module, they can be configured either hard-coded, in other words, you just plug in the configuration in Seascape and that is not changeable in the field, or for a lot of the parameters, you can also assign variables or registers to those parameters, and then you can make changes in the field, typically from the screen by setting up objects on the screen, but it could also be done by manipulating those variables within Ladder as well. Now, if you are going to be making any changes in the field, there is a key variable you'll have to take advantage of, and that is the Wi-Fi update bit. So if you ever make changes to your configuration from variables in the field at runtime, then once those changes have been made, those variables have been adjusted, you'll need to turn on the Wi-Fi update bit so those changes can be applied. Because the OCS is not sitting there continuously sending configuration data to the adapter. It's waiting for that bit to turn on that basically tells it, hey, there's changes that have been made. Go ahead and send those changes to the adapter. Now let's talk specifically about configuring the unit for client mode. Remember, client mode is where we're joining an existing Wi-Fi network. So most of the time when you're using the adapter, you know whether you're going to be using it in client mode or in access point mode. It's generally not switching between the two. Now, it is possible that you could get your mode from a variable instead of hard coding it. It's just that most of the time that's not required. Now, if you do decide to assign a variable to the mode, then when that variable has a value of 0, the module is disabled. When it has a value of 1, it's in access point mode. And when it has a value of 2, it's in client mode. But for now, let's assume that we're just hard coding client mode because we want the OCS to always join a local Wi-Fi network. So we're going to set that we're getting mode from configuration. And then we'll need to assign the SSID and the password to client mode so that it can be working properly. Now, there's a couple different ways we can do this. We can either assign a variable for SSID and password, or again, we can hard code it between single quotes. Okay, the SSID would be assigned if it's hard coded between single quotes as well as the password. Now, most of the time, you're probably not going to want to hard code the SSID and password because you're going to want to be able to change it in the field in the future. Even if you think it's going to be the same, they may make a change to the network in the future and you'll want to log into a different network or at least a different SSID and password. Now, here's something that's very important to note. Now, for the SSID and the password, you have a maximum length of 32 characters, so you'll have to be aware of that. And there's only certain special characters other than the normal numbers and letters, uppercase and lowercase, that are allowed. And those are shown on the screen there. So for instance, if you were wanting to use a password, or you're wanting the OCS to log in to a local network that had a password that included, let's say, an open left parenthesis, that wouldn't work because it's not included in the list of special characters there. So be aware of that. Now let's talk about configuring the adapter for use in access point mode. Remember, in access point mode, the OCS is creating its own local network around the machine. And it's configured very similarly with just a couple extra notes here. First of all, when you assign the SSID and the password for the OCS, and it's a little more typical for this to be set to be hard-coded than necessarily to have variables assigned to it. But when you do that, you have to pick a SSID, which is the name of the network, that's between 4 and 16 characters, and the password has to be between 8 and 16 characters. And again, you have that same list of special characters that are allowed if you want to use those as part of the SSID or the password. Now, one more option when you're using access point mode, you have the choice to set a checkbox whether you want to broadcast that SSID or not. So in other words, maybe you want that SSID to be kind of silently available and not scannable, if you will. So in that scenario, you would not check the broadcast SSID checkbox. All right, there are a few other things that we want to cover. The big one is Wi-Fi status. So you're going to want to assign a variable or a register to Wi-Fi status so that you can monitor communications and how things are going with the network. So the first 8 bits, or the lower byte of the 16 bits that makes up the Wi-Fi status, that is bitmapped, as you can see on the screen there. And our demo that we're going to be showing a little bit later takes advantage of that. And then the second 8 bits, or the most significant byte, can be used for signal strength. Now that would be used when you're in client mode, right? Because that's the scenario where you're logging into an existing network and signal strength has meaning in client mode. So you're going to want to pay attention to that. And that signal strength value is going to vary between 0, where you have no connection at all, and 4, where you have the strongest possible connection. Okay, now let's talk about general LAN config for the Wi-Fi adapter. So just like the other wired Ethernet ports on the OCS, you need to assign an IP address, a net mask, a gateway, etc. And you need to select the protocols, both resident and downloadable, that you're going to be supporting on that particular Wi-Fi connection. So really, it's identical in nearly every way to the way that you configure the wired ports. But just be aware that there is a separate dialog there available for configuring this information for the Wi-Fi port. Okay, now also available on the OCSs is a system menu with support for the Wi-Fi adapter. So that can be very useful for monitoring what's happening with the Wi-Fi adapter. Now, on the screen there, I'm showing a screen capture where I actually was flipping back and forth between access point mode and client mode. So that's why you see details under both. Generally, you're only going to see details under either the access point area or the client mode area, depending on how you're using the OCS and how you're using the adapter. Now, one extra note here, and we'll demonstrate this a little bit later, and that is if you're using client mode, you do have the option of selecting Join Network from the system menu, and the OCS will scan the available local networks and allow you to select one, as well as enter in the password from the system menu to log into that particular network. Okay, let's start our demonstrations by demonstrating client mode. In this demonstration, we're going to show you client mode. Client mode is where we are effectively using the Wi-Fi adapter to allow an OCS to log in to an existing local Wi-Fi network. And then once we show you that, we're going to show you how we can use WebMI elsewhere on the network to remotely monitor what's happening with this X5 in this case. All right, so I've pulled up the function keys and the system button. Let's go ahead and take a look at the Wi-Fi setup. Okay, so in the client section there, you can see that's configured. We've got our SSID, which is our network that we're logging into. You can see the name of that there on the screen. The password is hashed out. You know, it's effectively not showing you the password, as the case may be. And the connect auto setting is set to yes. That means that this X5 is going to automatically log into this Wi-Fi network without having to manually start that process. And then the client IP address is shown there at the bottom. That was assigned to the X5, to the Wi-Fi adapter of the X5 via DHCP from the gateway in the system. Okay, so that's the setup. Let's go back to the main menu, or the main screen, I should say. Okay, so let's see if we can access this guy from my computer, which is on the same network. Let's take a look at that by going to my computer. All right, let's type in the IP address of the OCS Wi-Fi adapter, and let's log in. There we are. We're going to accept the license, hit continue, and there we go. So we were able to very easily, on the same network via the OCS Wi-Fi adapter, that's what the OCS is using to access the network, we're able to remotely monitor and even control, in this case, what's happening with that OCS using WebMI. The setup was very easy. You know, I can go ahead and demonstrate this. I can change some settings from either the data object or the slider. My flasher and analog gauges are working fine. I can go to the setup screen and take a look at that, as well as the diagnostic screen. And it shows that indeed our client mode is okay and we are connected. You'll notice we only have a single signal bar in terms of signal strength, but that just indicates that, you know, the Wi-Fi network that I'm logging into is a little bit weak where the OCS is located, but it still seems to be operating just fine. So that's a look at client mode with the OCS Wi-Fi adapter. Okay, let me show you the setup I have here for client mode. And I'm going to go into hardware configuration. I'm going to the OCS Wi-Fi module, hit the config button, and then I have this configured for client mode. So I'm getting my mode from configuration as opposed from the screen. The other option, of course, would be to get it from the screen via a variable or register. Okay. Of course, my mode can be selected from the drop-down box. I've got that set for client. I have effectively a update register that I can toggle that we've talked about a little bit before. And then in client mode here, between single quotes is the name of the Wi-Fi network, and in single quotes is the password for the Wi-Fi network, and we've selected auto connect. Now, I have hard-coded the SSID, the password, and the password. Generally, I would recommend that you would set that up you would create your own Wi-Fi setup screen in your application and assign variables. In this case, they would be ASCII type variables for the name of the network as well as the password. But I have done this in hard coding, which you can tell by the single quotes around those areas there. And then I've assigned a status register that I can use to monitor the health of what's happening in Wi-Fi. Okay, so that's the setup for client mode, at least the setup in my demonstration. Okay, let's take a look at how we might log into a local existing Wi-Fi network if we're in client mode where we have not hard-coded the SSID and the password. Let's take a look at that. Okay, we're going to start by going to the system menu and navigating to the network area and the Wi-Fi adapter area. Now we're going to scroll down to the client section. And with Join Network highlighted, we're going to press Enter. As you can see, it is scanning for local networks. We'll select that one. Next, we go down to the password area. I'll type in the password. And then you'll see under status that it is in the process of connecting. This can take a little bit of time, although it's done now. And it shows connected, and it shows the IP address that we've been assigned over DHCP. So that's really all there is to it to log into a local network from the OCS itself when it's in client mode. All right, next it's time to head over to the bench and take a look at access point mode. Now let's take a look at the configuration for access point mode. Remember, in access point mode, the OCS is using the Wi-Fi adapter to create its own Wi-Fi network, which would typically be used for things like using WebMI to monitor the machine and control the machine, or potentially even using it for doing some local programming when you bring your laptop into the area without having to open up the enclosure, for instance. So this is access point mode. So let's take a look at the configuration I've done for this demonstration. All right, so I'm going again to hardware configuration and OCS Wi-Fi module. All right, now this time I have set things up so that we're using variables or registers for the configuration of the Wi-Fi. And so let's see how that works here. Okay, so under get mode, I've set that to register instead of hard coding it to either getting it from configuration, which is hard coding, or disabling it altogether. Okay, so register is what we want here. And then I've created a 16-bit variable and integer type variable called Wi-Fi mode. So in Wi-Fi mode, when that variable has a value of 0, Wi-Fi is disabled. When it has a value of 1, we're in access point mode. When it has a value of 2, we're in client mode. I've assigned another variable for Wi-Fi update. We talked about that in the opening, or not the opening, but in the slide portion of the program. But also be aware that this is a button that you're going to use anytime you make a change to the Wi-Fi configuration from the variables, let's say from the touchscreen. You're going to want to effectively turn on this 1-bit variable like a push button, and you can use it like an apply button. So make the change to the password or the SSID or something like that, and then turn on the Wi-Fi update variable, which you can use like an apply type scenario. And then I've assigned variables for the SSID and the password for the adapter's local Wi-Fi network that it's creating. And everything else, you can see the configuration here. I've still assigned the Wi-Fi status register, and I've decided to go ahead and broadcast the SSID so that people in the area can see the fact that there is a local OCS-generated SSID, which will be named, of course, whatever the contents of this variable are. And one more thing to mention, both the SSID and the password variables are ASCII type variables with up to 16 characters long. Okay, and then going to the rest of the LAN configuration, you can see here are variables assigned for IP address, net mask, and gateway, and which of the resident protocols we're supporting here. Okay, so that's the configuration for access actually, it's the configuration for changing the mode on the fly. We're going to use it for access point mode demonstration here in a second. Okay, let's start out here on the bench and take a look at our configuration for this demonstration of access point mode. Okay, so this looks the same as our last demonstration, but I've created an additional screen where we can select the Wi-Fi mode on the fly between off, access point, and client, and where we can set the SSID and the password for our local Wi-Fi network that's being generated by the Wi-Fi adapter. Now, of course, you would want to make sure that this screen is password protected by using, the capability of the OCS to have access levels for certain screens and certain objects. So that's something to keep in mind here. But you can see that we've also got this apply button that we've created here. So if I were to make a change to either my SSID or my password or my Wi-Fi mode from the screen here, I need to make sure after I made that change that I press the apply button, and then that will set the appropriate variable to a 1 in the OCS and cause that change to actually take effect. Okay, now let's return to the main screen. And let's see if we can actually access this, again, from a computer, but this time from a computer over the OCS's Wi-Fi network. Okay, so this is the Wi-Fi setup for my computer. I am connected to the Wi-Fi network that the Wi-Fi adapter connected to the X5 is generating. It's called Horner OCS. That's what I named it from the X5 screen. While it does not have an internet connection, it is secured because it does require a password. Okay, now let's go ahead and use WebMI to access the X5 through this connection. This time the IP address is not an IP address that was provided to the X5 over DHCP. This is the IP address that I configured through the screen. All right, so that's 192.168.0.200. I can type in my username and password, accept the license, and there we are. Once again, we are able to view and control the X5 over Wi-Fi, this time with the Wi-Fi adapter being in access point mode instead of client mode, creating its own network that we can use for maybe our cell phone or mobile device or maybe our computer when we're in range of the OCS via Wi-Fi. Okay, let's wrap up. So the Horner Wi-Fi adapter is a very useful accessory that allows you to add Wi-Fi capability to any OCS that has a full-sized USB-A port, at least if it's a more recent model. So the more recent models supported include the X5, the entire XL series from the XL4 on up. We're not supporting the XLE and the XLT, and the XL Prime series. Now, there's a couple different ways you can use Wi-Fi with an OCS. You can use client mode, which allows an OCS to log into an existing Wi-Fi network, maybe on a campus or in a plant. And then you can also use the adapter in access point mode, where it creates its own network that around the machine that you could use maybe for monitoring and controlling the machine over WebMI, or maybe just as a useful way of using a laptop wirelessly for Seascape monitoring, troubleshooting, and even programming right around the machine. So pretty useful accessory for sure. Okay, this is the part of the program where I remind you we're here every Tuesday at 2 o'clock, whether we have a live session completely or whether we're pre-recorded like today. But in either case, we'll be streaming live every Tuesday at 2 o'clock with someone standing by for those watching live to answer questions in the chat section. And for those of you watching on replay, like a lot of you do, you can always give us your comments and questions in the comment section, and we'll get back to you just as soon as we can. Okay, now a reminder, we're celebrating 10 years of the Horner Lighting Group. Don't forget to check out the great Horner lighting videos that are available alongside our automation content on the Horner APG YouTube channel. Now, for those of you interested in training, we have a couple classes coming up. We have advanced training in August 8th and 9th, and we have IEC training from September 13th through 14th. Now, if you're interested in these courses, I would encourage you to sign up before they get full. Okay, next week we've got a good session for you. We're going to be talking about using a GPS receiver with a Horner OCS. And the GPS receiver we're talking about specifically is available from Banner Engineering. It's a really nice product, and marrying that GPS receiver with a Horner OCS has some real functionality, and we're going to talk about that next week. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to our channel. It doesn't cost anything. And if you choose notifications when you subscribe, you'll be notified every time we go live or every time we post a new video. All right, until next week, let's all get out there and do us some good.